Have you ever chosen what was easy, only to realize it was the trap that kills tomorrow's potential? I have met many hardworking people. They arrive early. They leave late. They complete every task assigned to them. And they believe that as long as they keep going like that, life will eventually get better on its own. I used to think that way. There was a time when I worked extremely hard. I kept my promises. I never skipped a shift. I did exactly what the system required. From the outside, everything looked fine. But inside, there was a very strange feeling, a feeling that I was busy, but not truly moving forward. I was not failing, but I was not going anywhere either. And then, on a very ordinary day, I realized something that changed the way I see life. I was working within the system, not building the system. I was completing tasks, but not taking responsibility for the final outcome. I was thinking like a worker, not like a guide. You see, the difference between a worker and a leader is not in the title. It lies in how they think when no one is telling them what to do next. A worker asks, "What do I need to do next?" A leader asks, "What actually needs to be done?" Just one different question, but it changes the entire trajectory of a life. If you have ever felt like you are doing a lot but still standing still, if you have ever wondered why your effort does not bring the results it deserves, then maybe the problem is not your hard work, but the way you think about your own role. In this video, I want to share with you the core principles that help me shift from the mindset of someone who only completes tasks to the mindset of someone who takes responsibility for direction and stay until the end. Because the final principle may be the silent decision that changes your entire life, just as it once changed mine. Principle 1, leadership begins with responsibility. I did not learn this lesson from books, but from a very familiar feeling, being exhausted and still feeling empty. There was a period when I worked more than most people around me. I arrived early, I left late, I did my part, and I waiting for results to come. Waiting for someone to recognize me, waiting for a turning point. But the turning point never came. There were only days following one another, so similar that I began to ask myself, where am I going? Then I realized that I was avoiding something very simple yet very heavy, responsibility. Not the responsibility of finishing tasks, but responsibility for the final outcome. You can finish what you were assigned and still go nowhere. You can be very busy and still create nothing meaningful. Because leadership does not begin when you are given authority. It begins when you take responsibility, even when no one asks you to. There is a quiet difference between two types of people. The first says, I did my part. The second asks, did what I did move us closer to the goal? They sound similar, but the consequences are completely different. I have seen people who are very good at completing tasks. They are precise, they are reliable, but their lives repeat themselves. And then there are others not necessarily more talented who go much further. The difference is not talent, but the responsibility they dare to carry. Leaders carry responsibility for results, not just for processes. Imagine you are climbing a ladder. You polish each rung, you climb diligently, you skip no steps. But at some point you look up and realize the ladder is leaning against the wrong wall. You can keep climbing, or you can stop, take responsibility, and change the wall. Leadership begins at the moment you dare to ask, are we climbing the right wall? When you are only responsible for your own tasks, you become an executor. When you are responsible for the outcome, you begin to lead even if no one has called you a leader yet. I have seen this repeat itself again and again. A person who waits for instructions will always need someone else to show the way. A person who takes responsibility creates direction. They do not wait for someone to tell them what to do next. They ask, what needs to be done most and why? Just changing the question is enough to change your inner world. Responsibility is not a burden to weigh you down. It is a lever to lift you up. When you say, I take responsibility, you are saying that your future is not in the hands of circumstances, but in the hands of decisions. You stop blaming schedules, bosses, or systems. You begin shaping the system, at least the part of the system within your reach. Someone once asked me, but what if I don't have decision-making power? I answered, power does not come before responsibility. Responsibility comes first, power follows. You are not promoted. and then start thinking like a leader. You think like a leader, and then the world gradually gives you room to lead. I remember someone telling me that he always hit his targets every single year, but he stayed in place. The reason was simple. He took responsibility for the target, not for the impact. He finished the task and stopped. Leaders are different. They ask one more question, the question no one forces them to ask. What does this create in the long term? Leadership is when you take responsibility for the future, not just for today. It is when you look beyond the to-do list and see the destination. It is when you stop saying I'm busy and start saying I'm building. And let me say this very slowly. Being busy is not evidence of leadership. Results are. Results not just numbers, but the impact you create on others, on the system, on direction. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, today, what are you taking responsibility for completion or final outcomes? If no one is watching, do you still care about the result? If no one praises you, do you still fix what is wrong? There is one sentence I want you to carry with you. You do not become a leader when people follow you. You become a leader when you stop blaming. From that moment, your behavior changes. You do not just do things to get them done. You do them in the right direction. You do not only ask, is it finished? You ask, does it matter? And when you begin taking responsibility for results, you will notice something very interesting. The way you measure your workday changes as well. That is exactly where we will go next. Because after taking responsibility, the next question is no longer, how many tasks did I do? But, did those tasks create real progress? And that is when we move to the next principle where the line between being busy and moving forward is clearly drawn. Principle 2, busy is not progress. There is a very dangerous illusion I once believed, and many people still do. Being busy means you are moving forward. I used to measure my workdays by hours. I used to be proud of a packed schedule. I used to think exhaustion was a sign of value. If a day ended with me completely drained, I considered it a good day. But then I realized something that made me stop. I was more tired, but my life was not better. Being busy can make you feel secure. It gives you the feeling that you are trying. But that feeling is sometimes just a painkiller, not a cure. Workers measure life by time. Leaders measure life by impact. This difference is subtle, but its consequences last for decades. You can work 12 hours a day, but if those hours only maintain the status quo, you are just keeping the machine running, not taking it anywhere. Being busy is like running on a treadmill. You sweat. You breathe hard, but when you step off, you are still standing in the same place. I have met people who tell me, I don't have time. Usually they are the ones who don't know what they are building. When you don't have a clear destination, everything becomes urgent. And when everything is urgent, nothing is important. Leaders do not try to do more. They try to do better. They understand that time is not the thing that needs the most management attention is. Where you place your attention, your life will flow. If your attention is fragmented by small tasks, no matter how busy you are, you will not create progress. There is one question that changed the way I end each day. What did I do today that made a difference? Not how many things did I do, but which of them were truly worth doing? Being busy makes you reactive. Progress requires you to be proactive. Reactive people live for today. Proactive people build for tomorrow. When you react, you are always chasing emails, chasing meeting schedules, chasing other people's demands. But when you are proactive, you start your day with a different question. If there were only one thing to do today, what would it be? Leadership begins when you dare to ignore tasks that lead nowhere, even if they seem urgent, even if they make you look hardworking in other people's eyes. I have seen people who work nonstop, yet year after year, their lives do not change. And I have seen people who do less, but go further. The difference is this. They do not measure their workday by how tired they are, but by how much progress they make. Imagine you are rowing a boat. If you row very hard, but in the wrong direction, you will only move farther away from the shore you want to reach. Workers often row faster. Leaders stop, check the compass, and adjust course even if it makes them look slower. There is a quiet courage in not being busy. The courage to say no. The courage to leave empty space, just to think. The courage to accept that without direction, speed only gets you lost faster. Leaders understand that busyness is the enemy of clarity. When your mind is constantly filled with things to do, there is no room left for the question why. And when you stop asking why, you begin to live on autopilot. I want you to pause here and ask yourself honestly, if I continue at my current pace for another 5 years, where will I end up? Do the things I do every day truly lead me where I want to go? Or do they only help me survive? There is one sharp sentence you need to remember. Busyness helps you survive the day. Progress determines who you become in life. When you start thinking like a leader, you are no longer proud of a packed schedule. You are proud of an intentional one. You do not boast about doing a lot. You quietly make sure that everything you do has a reason to exist. And then, once you stop confusing busyness with progress, another change happens. You begin to see your work not just by quantity, but by long-term impact. You start to notice that some small tasks create big results, while some big tasks leave nothing behind. That is the doorway that takes us to the next part. Because when you no longer measure your day by how busy it was, you begin to measure it with an even deeper question. Do what I'm doing move me and the people around me closer to our shared goal? And that is when we talk about results, not just effort. Principle 3, results matter more than effort. There is a sentence that easily makes people feel at ease. At least I tried. I once clung to that sentence like a life buoy. On days when nothing moved forward, I comforted myself by saying, I tried. But the older I get, the more I understand a hard truth. Life does not reward effort, it rewards results. Effort is necessary, but effort is not enough. Many people work hard their entire lives and still do not achieve what they want. Not because they are lazy, but because they stop at the feeling of having tried instead of facing real results. Workers usually ask, did I try my best? Leaders ask, did this create results? These two questions lead to two very different lives. I have met people who can describe in great detail everything they have done. How many hours, how many meetings, how many emails. But when I ask, so what changed? They fall silent. Because movement is not the same as progress. Results do not care how tired you are. They only care about what was created. Leadership begins when you dare to look straight at results without blame, without excuses, without avoidance. When you dare to say, this is my result, if it's not good enough, I will change how I work. There's a very clear maturity in that moment. Workers often cling to circumstances. The market is tough, the timing is wrong, others don't cooperate. Leaders look at results and ask a different question. What can I do differently to create better results? Let me give you a very simple image. If you grow a garden and the plants do not bear fruit, you can stand there saying you watered consistently and worked very hard. But the leader of the garden does something else. They look at the soil, they look at the seeds, they look at the way it's cared for, and they change things until fruit appears. Results are the most honest metric. They do not insult you. They just tell the truth. When you start thinking like a leader, you are no longer afraid of bad results. You are only afraid of learning nothing from them, because every result is feedback. Not a judgment of who you are, but feedback on how you are thinking and acting. There are days when you do a lot, but results are small. And there are days when you do less, but results are clearer. Leaders learn how to reallocate energy, not spreading effort thin, but focusing on leverage points. That is when you stop asking, am I busy? And start asking, does this create results? I have told many people this. Results are the language the world understands best. You can explain, you can promise, you can present. But in the end, only results convince others and yourself. Leadership is not about pushing people to try harder. Leadership is about directing effort to create the right results. There is a common mistake, thinking that if everyone tries harder, results will automatically improve. Reality is different. Effort in the wrong direction only creates collective exhaustion. Leaders are responsible for making sure every effort has a purpose. And this starts with you. Ask yourself honestly, last week, which of the things you did created the clearest results? Which ones only kept you busy? If you had to cut 50% of your current work, which tasks would you keep? There's one sentence I want you to remember clearly. Effort makes you feel like a good person. Results determine whether you are on the right path. When you accept this, you will see a major change in how you work. You are no longer proud of having tried. You are proud of having made a difference. And you do not complain when results are not what you want, you adjust. That is the spirit of leadership. And now, when you understand that results matter more than effort, a deeper question appears. A question most people avoid. What larger purpose do my results serve? Because creating results is one thing, but creating meaningful results, that is where leadership truly begins to expand. That is where we will go next, when you learn to see the bigger picture, not just your own tasks. If you feel these principles touch exactly what you are struggling with, subscribe to the channel to continue this journey with me. We have only taken the first steps, and the more important part lies ahead. Principle 4, see the whole, not just your part. There is something I realized quite late in life. Many people do their work very well, but do not understand where they stand. They know their part. They are familiar with the schedule. They are skilled at what lies right in front of them. But when you ask, how does what you are doing connect to something bigger? They hesitate. I used to be like that too. There was a period when I focused only on my part. I measured my value by what I completed each day. Was the report done? Were the sales numbers hit? Was the delivery late? Everything was very concrete. But over time, I increasingly felt my work losing its meaning, not because it was useless, but because I no longer saw the whole picture. Workers see life through a thread. Leaders see life through a fabric. A thread is clear, detailed, easy to control. But only when you see the entire fabric do you understand the pattern that is forming. When you only see your part, you ask, is this my job? When you see the whole, you ask, what else does this affect? Leadership begins when you lift your head from the desk and start seeing connections. The connection between today's decisions and tomorrow's consequences. The connection between a small action and the chain reaction that follows. The connection between people and people. I once observed two people doing very similar jobs. When asked what they were doing, the first said, I'm just getting the work done. The second said, I'm contributing to building something long-term, same job, but two very different inner worlds. When you only see your part, you get tired easily. When you see the whole picture, you rediscover motivation. Because humans do not live on money or tasks alone, we live on meaning. And meaning only appears when you understand why what you do matters within a bigger picture. Leaders understand that a small decision here can create 10 consequences elsewhere. That is why they do not only ask, is it done, but is it done the right way? Imagine you were painting a huge mural, but you are only assigned to color a small square. If you focus only on making that square beautiful, you might accidentally ruin the overall composition. But if you understand the full layout, you will know whether to go darker or lighter, whether to stop or continue. Leadership is the ability to see the composition. When you cannot see the big picture, you easily become defensive. You protect your part. You say, that's not my responsibility. But when you see the whole, you start thinking differently. What is best for the shared direction? I have seen many people lose their passion simply because they no longer understand what their work is serving. They are busy, they comply, but they are no longer connected. And when connection is gone, people work out of habit, not from the heart. Leaders provide context. They help people see why something exists. Not through grand slogans, but by constantly linking today's small actions to long-term goals. When people understand that connection, they work more carefully, more consistently, and with greater pride. There is a question I often ask myself when I feel lost. If this disappeared, what would be affected? That question forces me to look beyond myself. It pulls me out of routine and places me back into the flow of the entire system. Leadership is not knowing everything. Leadership is knowing what connects to what. When you see the whole picture, you start making different decisions. You no longer optimize for your own short-term benefit. You optimize for sustainability. You no longer ask, what do I get? But where are we going? And let me say this very clearly. Being busy without seeing the whole picture leads to burnout. Because you are spending energy on pieces without knowing what picture they belong to. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, What bigger purpose does the work you do every day serve? Do you see the connection between what you are doing and the future you want to build? Or are you just completing a series of shapeless tasks? There is one sentence I want you to remember. Those who only see their part will work. Those who see the whole will create meaning. When you begin to see the bigger picture, a very natural change happens. You no longer care only about getting things done. You start caring about doing them in the right place. And when you do things in the right place, your impact multiplies. But seeing the whole picture is still not enough, because there are people who see the picture very clearly, yet still do not go far. The reason is that they get stuck at achieving goals instead of becoming the kind of person capable of carrying those goals. And that is exactly where we move next, where leadership is no longer measured by what you achieve, but by who you become in the process. Principle 5. Growth matters more than goals. There was a time when I loved setting goals, clear numbers, specific deadlines, a very solid feeling, and I achieved many of those goals. But then I realized something that made me rethink my entire view of success. You can achieve goals and still not go any further in life. It sounds paradoxical, but it is true. Workers live for goals. Leaders live for growth. Goals give you a destination. Growth gives you the capacity to keep going. I have met people who hit every target assigned to them, year after year, yet they stayed exactly where they were, not because they lacked discipline, but because they did not grow with what they were doing. They only completed, they did not transform. Leadership begins when you ask a different question after every effort. What kind of person did this make me become? If a goal only gives you more of something, it has limits. But if the process turns you into someone else, its value lasts a lifetime. There is a very subtle difference between two mindsets. The first says, when I achieve this, I'll be fine. The second says, who do I need to become to be worthy of this? The first chases results. The second builds foundations. I remember once meeting a salesperson who told me he always hit his targets, but after many years, his position never changed. He didn't understand why. The truth is simple. Targets do not promote you. The person you become does. Leadership is not built through moments of achievement. It is built through moments of being stretched. Easy goals create effort. Hard goals create a new version of you. When you think like a leader, you do not ask, is this goal achievable? You ask, where does this goal require me to grow? And sometimes that question alone makes you accept challenges you would have avoided before, because you understand that real value is not in the reward, but in the internal change. Workers see failure as a signal to stop. Leaders see failure as feedback for growth. When a goal is not achieved, a worker says, I couldn't do it. A leader says, what did I learn? This difference does not make leaders immune to pain, but it gives pain meaning. And when pain has meaning, people do not quit, they transform. Here is a very simple metaphor. Every project is a gym. Every difficulty is a weight. If you only care about finishing the workout, you will not get stronger. But if you care about how your muscles are changing, you will leave the gym with new capacity. Leadership is the accumulation of capacity over time. That is why leaders never say, I'm done. They say, I'm improving. Because growth has no finish line. Each higher level opens a new perspective. Each new skill brings a new responsibility. And if you stop growing, everything you achieve will soon exceed your ability to sustain it. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, are the goals you are pursuing helping you grow? Or do they only make you busier, more tired, yet still the same person? There's one sentence I want you to remember very clearly. What you achieve can be lost. What you become cannot. When you start placing growth ahead of goals, something very strange happens. Goals begin to arrive more consistently, not because you force them, but because you have become the kind of person who can create them. And then you understand that leadership is not a series of isolated wins. It is a continuous process of becoming. But there is one more factor that determines how fast or slow that process unfolds. Not talent, not opportunity, but how you face failure and your own emotions. And that is exactly where we will continue, where leaders learn to see failure not as a sentence, but as necessary feedback to continue growing. Principle 6, failure is feedback, not identity. There is a quiet fear I see in many people. The fear of failure is not because it hurts, but because it is shameful. They are not afraid of being wrong. They are afraid of being labeled. I used to be like that too. There were times when I did not achieve the results I wanted. There were efforts that did not bear fruit. And what made me hesitate was not the failure itself, but the question echoing in my mind, if I fail, what does that say about me? Many people unconsciously answer that question with a dangerous conclusion. I failed, which means I am not good enough. Workers often see failure as a verdict. Leaders see failure as feedback. A verdict closes the door. Feedback opens a path. Leadership begins when you can separate two things: what you do and who you are. A poor result does not define you. It only describes an attempt. I have told many people this. If you are not willing to learn from failure, you will have to repeat it. Not because of fate, but because you missed the message it carried. Failure always says something. It speaks about how you prepared, how you set priorities, how you reacted when things did not go as planned. But it does not say who you are. After failure, a worker asks, "Who messed this up?" A leader asks, "What didn't work?" The first question looks for blame. The second looks for understanding. There is a very important moment in the journey of growth. The moment you stop defending yourself against failure. When you no longer need to hide, no longer need to justify, no longer need to explain endlessly to protect your ego. You simply look at the result and say, all right, what is this teaching me? I have seen people defeated not by failure, but by the way they retell failure to themselves. They turn an event into a story, and that story becomes an identity. Leadership is when you do not allow an event to rewrite who you are. Leaders do not avoid failure, but they do not live in it either. They step out of emotion quickly enough to return to observation. They extract the lesson and reinvest it into the next attempt. There is a very clear difference between two reactions. A worker fails and stops. A leader fails and adjusts. And adjustment is the expression of intelligence. Imagine you are learning to drive. Every time you turn the wrong way, you do not conclude that you are not cut out for driving. You simply adjust the steering wheel. But as adults, somehow we start labeling ourselves every time we stumble. Leadership is maturity in how you face mistakes. When you see failure as feedback, you become calmer. You no longer panic. You no longer need to appear perfect. And that calmness helps you learn faster. There is one very important question I want you to carry with you. If this result is just data, what is the data telling me? That question turns emotion into information. And when you can do that, you begin to move faster than those still trapped in their feelings. There is one sentence I want you to remember. Failure happens to what you do, not to who you are. When you understand this, you will dare to try more. Not because you are fearless, but because you no longer let fear control your identity. And the more you try, the more feedback you accumulate. The more feedback you have, the better you refine. Leadership is not a journey without stumbles. It is a journey of not repeating the same mistake for the same reason. But to do that, you need another kind of strength, a kind that does not come from motivation or fleeting inspiration. You need inner discipline, the thing that keeps you steady even when emotions fluctuate. And that is exactly where we continue, where leadership no longer relies on authority or words, but is built on influence, credibility, and personal discipline. Principle 7, influence beats authority. There is a very common misunderstanding about leadership, that you need a title first, and influence will come later. I used to believe that. I used to think that once I had authority, people would listen. But reality taught me a very different lesson. Authority can force compliance, but only influence makes people willingly follow. Workers wait for power in order to lead. Leaders build influence long before they have power. Authority can command. Influence creates trust, and trust cannot be forced. I have seen people with high titles but very weak voices. Every decision had to come with pressure. Every request had to be backed by control. They had to keep reminding others, I'm the one in charge here. That is a sign that influence is not strong enough. On the other hand, I have also seen people with no special title at all, yet whenever they speak, others naturally pay attention. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Not out of obligation, but out of trust. True leadership does not need to be announced. It is felt. Influence does not come from words or slogans. It comes from consistency, from doing the right thing even when no one is watching, from keeping small promises, from how you respond when things go wrong. Workers rely on supervision. Leaders rely on personal credibility. Credibility is not built in a day. It is the result of hundreds of small decisions: being on time, being prepared, keeping your word, not blaming, not exaggerating. These things sound ordinary, but that repeated ordinariness creates lasting influence. There is one truth I learned very early. You cannot fake consistency. Time will reveal everything. People may be persuaded by words for a while, but they only trust you when your actions match your words. When that happens, you do not need to give orders. Others will adjust themselves to the standard you set. Influence is voluntary energy. When people trust you, they do more than the minimum. They do not just get things done, they act with ownership, and that is something authority can never buy. I have seen organizations try to increase performance through pressure. That can work in the short term, but in the long run, it creates silent resistance. People do not like being controlled, but they are willing to follow an example. Leadership is when you become that example. Not perfect, but trustworthy. There is a question leaders should ask themselves every day. If everyone worked exactly the way I do, what would the results be? That question is brutally honest. It forces you to look at yourself instead of others, because influence always starts from within, then spreads outward. Workers ask, who is in charge? Leaders ask, who am I influencing? And influence is not just the result of competence, it is the result of character. People follow those they feel safe walking with. Safety does not come from someone always being right, but from someone being consistent in principles. There is one sentence I want you to remember. Authority makes people comply, influence makes them believe. When you start building influence, you will realize that leadership does not need to be loud. You do not need to prove that you are leading. You only need to live by the standard you want to see in others. And when your influence becomes strong enough, something very interesting happens. You begin to realize that it does not come from big moments, but from small daily disciplines. Those quiet habits form the foundation of long-term trust. But influence alone is still not enough to go far, because influence needs protection. And what protects influence is not words, but character. That is exactly where we will continue. Where leadership is anchored in character, the thing that keeps influence from eroding over time. Principle 8, character creates trust. There is one thing time has taught me very clearly. Trust does not come from talent, it comes from character. You can be smart, you can speak well, you can make a great first impression. But if your character is not solid, trust will slowly wear away until there is nothing left to hold it together. Workers often think results are everything. Leaders understand that results only stand when there is character supporting them from behind. I have met very capable people that no one wants to go the long road with, not because they lack ability, but because they lack consistency. Today they say one thing, tomorrow they do another. When things are smooth, they are kind. When pressure comes, their principles disappear. Trust does not collapse in one big moment. It collapses through many small broken promises. Leadership does not require you to be perfect. Leadership requires you to be trustworthy. And being trustworthy does not mean never being wrong. It means taking responsibility for your mistakes. Workers try to hide mistakes. Leaders correct them openly and quietly continue to uphold standards. There is a strange strength in people with solid character. They do not need to talk much about values. Others feel those values through how they show up on time, how they keep their word, how they do not change principles just because circumstances change. I once said this, when no one is watching, your character is at work. That is when leadership is truly tested. When there are no cameras, when there are no rewards, When there is no one to impress, what you choose to do in those moments determines who will trust you when things really matter. Leaders understand that trust is an invisible asset, but an extremely expensive one. Lose money, you can earn it back. Lose reputation, you may rebuild it. But lose trust, and you will pay with a very long stretch of time if you get another chance at all. Here's a very simple metaphor. Character is like a foundation. No one sees it. But if the foundation is weak, no matter how beautiful the house is, it will crack. Leadership is not built on a stage. It is built in everyday life. How you treat people who cannot benefit you. How you respond when you are misunderstood. How you stay calm when tested. Those things create quiet credibility. Workers ask, how do I get people to listen to me? Leaders ask, how do I get people to trust me? And the answer always comes back to one thing. Live in a way that your words need no further explanation. Remember this, trust takes years to build, but can be lost in 1 minute of compromised character. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, if others observed you in the smallest things, how much would they trust you? Do you keep standards when no one reminds you? Are you consistent when there is no immediate benefit? Leadership is not about making others admire you. Leadership is about making others feel safe walking with you. And when trust is formed, your influence becomes natural. You do not need to control. You do not need to push. People willingly cooperate because they trust that you will not betray principles when things get difficult. But to preserve that character over time, you need one more thing. Not motivation, not inspiration. You need structure. Because even the person with the strongest character will burn out if everything relies only on willpower. And that is why leadership cannot rely on personality alone. It needs systems to protect standards. And that is exactly where we move next. Where leaders learn how to build systems so they do not have to rely on willpower every day. Principle 9. Systems beat willpower. There is one mistake I once made, and many others make as well. Believing that if you are determined enough, you can do anything. Willpower sounds strong. It makes you feel in control. But willpower also gets tired very quickly. I have seen many people start with great enthusiasm, full energy in the first week, full determination in the first month. Then life steps in, fatigue appears, emotions fluctuate, and good habits slowly disappear. Not because they are weak, but because they place the burden in the wrong place. Workers rely on willpower. Leaders rely on systems. Willpower is personal. Systems are sustainable. Leadership is not about convincing yourself to do the right thing every day. Leadership is about designing a structure that makes the right thing easier to do. Think about a farmer. Every morning, he does not go to the field and hope the soil will be fertile. He plows, plants, waters, and schedules the harvest. He builds a system so results do not depend on mood. I once told a young man, don't just fix the problem, fix the process that creates the problem. If you only fix the problem, you will meet it again. If you fix the process, you prevent it from returning. Leadership is the ability to see recurring causes, not just react to symptoms. Workers often say, I don't have motivation today. Leaders say, where's my system lacking? When you rely on willpower, every day is a battle. When you have systems, every day is a flow. I have learned this. Consistency does not come from inspiration, it comes from design. Design your schedule. Design your environment. Design small but repeatable processes. A simple checklist used every day is more powerful than an inspiring speech used once. A habit placed in the right environment will beat an emotional promise every time. Leaders do not ask, how can I try harder? They ask, how can the right thing happen even when I'm tired? Here is a metaphor I really like. Systems are like railroad tracks. Willpower is like the engine. You can have a very powerful engine, but without tracks, it will derail. Tracks do not make the train move, but they keep it moving in the right direction. Leadership is about laying tracks for yourself and for others. When you build systems, you do not need constant supervision. You do not need endless reminders. People know when, where, and what to do. That frees up energy so you can focus on what matters more: strategy and vision. Remember this: willpower helps you start. Systems help you go far. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, are the results you have today the product of willpower or of systems? When you are tired, what still continues? If you were gone for a week, what would collapse? These questions are brutally honest. They show you whether you are leading with emotion or with structure. Leaders understand that systems are not rigidity. They are design freedom. When repetitive tasks are structured, your mind is freed to think further ahead. You do not need a complex system. You need a system that is used consistently, a fixed schedule, a clear working rhythm, a consistent feedback loop. These small things repeated create reliability, and reliability is the foundation of sustainable leadership. But even with good systems, there is still one more skill that determines how fast or how far you go. Not how you react after things happen, but whether you can see what is coming before it happens. And that is exactly where we will move next, where leaders learn how to prepare ahead instead of chasing from behind. Principle 10, anticipation is power. There's a very quiet difference between people who remain calm and people who panic. The calm ones have thought ahead, the panicked ones only react. I spent most of my life in reaction mode. When problems appeared, I rushed to fix them. When pressure came, I tensed up. I was proud of being good at handling things. But over time, I realized handling things is not leadership. It is simply the consequence of not being prepared. Workers live in reaction. Leaders live in preparation. Leadership does not require you to predict the future correctly. Leadership requires you to respect the fact that the future will arrive. I learned that many things we call crises are actually predictable situations. Deadlines do not arrive unexpectedly. Markets do not change overnight. Burnout does not happen in a single day. The signs are always there, we just do not look. Leaders train a different habit. They look at patterns, not just events. They ask, what is this repeating? They ask, if this trend continues, what will happen? Leadership is the ability to think earlier, not act faster. Imagine a chessboard. A beginner sees the next move. A good player sees 3 moves ahead. A great player sees 5. None of them see the entire game, but the one who sees further always has the psychological advantage. Anticipation is not anxiety. It is awareness. Anxious people imagine disasters. Leaders imagine possibilities both good and bad so they can be ready. I once asked myself a very simple question that changed how I work. If this fails, where will it fail? That question did not scare me. It prepared me. I was no longer surprised when problems appeared because I had already accounted for them. And when you are not surprised, you do not panic. Workers say, I didn't see this coming. Leaders say, I prepared for that possibility. That difference creates calm, and calm is a rare form of power. When you are calm, people trust you. When you are calm, your decisions are clearer. When you are calm, you are not swept up by collective emotion. Here's a metaphor I really like. Anticipation is like carrying a raincoat. You do not create the rain. You simply do not let it soak you. Leadership is not about controlling the world. Leadership is about not letting the world control your reactions. Leaders spend time on things that are not urgent but important. Thinking, observing, reviewing data, listening to small shifts in human behavior. While others are busy chasing today, leaders quietly prepare for tomorrow. Remember this: reaction helps you survive. Anticipation helps you lead. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, in your work and your life, what keeps repeating? If it continues for another 6 months or a year, what will the result be? Are you waiting for problems to appear, or are you preparing for them? Leadership does not wait for the red light to stop. Leadership slows down while the light is still yellow. And when you begin to live with anticipation, something very interesting happens. You no longer feel constantly backed into a corner. You gain space to think, and that space is where good decisions are born. But anticipation will not take you far if you have not mastered yourself. Because preparing for the future requires discipline in the present. You cannot lead others further than you have led yourself. And that is exactly where we move next. Where leadership returns to its most important starting point, leading yourself. Principle 11, lead yourself before leading others. There is a truth many people want to avoid. You cannot lead others further than where you have led yourself. I have met many people who told me they wanted to lead, they wanted influence, they wanted to be heard. But when I looked at their daily lives, I saw something else. They had not yet mastered themselves. Leadership does not begin on a stage. Leadership begins in moments when no one is watching. Workers wait for external motivation. Leaders live by internal standards. I once thought that when pressure came, I needed more motivation. Then I realized motivation comes after discipline, not before. When you have discipline, you do not need to convince yourself every day. You simply follow the standards you have chosen. Self-leadership is the ability to do the right thing, even when you do not feel like doing it. Being on time when no one checks, preparing thoroughly when no one asks, keeping promises to yourself when there is no immediate reward. These things sound small, but they create quiet credibility. And quiet credibility is the foundation of all lasting leadership. Workers say, when I reach a higher position, I'll be more disciplined. Leaders say, I'll be more disciplined, so I'm ready for a higher position. That difference determines the order of growth. I have seen many people seek influence before they have internal order. What happens then? They create chaos, because if you cannot manage your own reactions, you will never manage a group. Self-leadership is not rigid control. It is emotional mastery. When things do not go your way, how do you react? When criticized, do you defend yourself or do you listen? When you are tired, do you give up or do you adjust your rhythm? Those answers reveal your level of leadership more clearly than any title. There is one thing I learned very early. Calmness is the currency of leadership. Those who lose their calm lose credibility. Those who keep their calm create safety. People do not follow perfect leaders. They follow stable ones. Self-leadership also shows in how you respect your own time. Those who do not respect their own time will unconsciously waste the time of others. When you are late, you are saying your time matters more than theirs. Leadership does not allow that. There is a very direct question I want you to ask yourself. If no one else suffered consequences except you, would you still stay disciplined? That question strips everything away. Leadership does not need an audience. It needs inner commitment. Workers need reminders. Leaders remind themselves. And when you lead yourself long enough, something natural happens. Others begin to adjust to you, not because you demand it, but because they sense order in the way you live. Remember this sentence? You cannot pass on what you do not live every day. When you master yourself, leadership is no longer a role. It becomes a presence. The way you enter a room, the way you listen, the way you decide, everything signals that you are someone worth following. And now, as we near the end of this journey, there is one final principle that must be said. A principle that is not loud or flashy, but ties everything together. Because leadership is not about escaping work. It is about elevating work into meaning. And that is where we conclude this journey, where leaders no longer ask, what am I doing? But ask, what am I building? Principle 12. Build direction, not just activity. There is a question that has followed me for many years, quiet, undramatic, yet powerful enough to stop me whenever life becomes too busy. What am I building? Not what am I doing? Not how many tasks I have completed. But what am I building? And how long will it stand after I am gone? Workers live in activity. Leaders live in direction. Activity fills time. Direction creates meaning. I have seen many people work their entire lives without knowing what they built. They leave behind busy days, checked off to-do lists, numbers once achieved, and then everything fades. Not because they did not try, but because their efforts were never anchored to a direction big enough. Leadership is when you connect every small action to a long-term direction. When you know what you are building, you work differently. You stop being pulled by every urgent thing. You begin to choose. You begin to say no more often to protect the yes. I once realized that most human exhaustion does not come from doing too much, but from doing many things that lead nowhere. You can endure enormous effort if you clearly see where you are heading. But without direction, even small tasks become heavy. Leaders do not run faster than the crowd. They move ahead through direction. Leadership is not about escaping labor. Leadership is about elevating labor. When you have direction, the same old work suddenly carries new meaning. The same effort now becomes a brick in a structure, not a repeated motion. You no longer ask, "Is today done?" You ask, "Where did I place today's brick?" There's one thing I want you to remember very clearly. Life is not measured by how busy you are, but by how clear your direction is. You may not know every step, but you must know which direction you are building toward. Leadership is the ability to hold that direction even when no one reminds you, even when results have not arrived, even when progress is slow, because you understand that anything worth building takes time. I once said that workers say, "I'm busy." Leaders say, "I'm building." One fills days. The other shapes the future. And that difference does not come from talent, luck, or title. It comes from a very quiet decision, the decision to take responsibility for your own direction. There is one sentence I want you to carry with you as this video ends. When your thinking rises, everything else eventually follows. Leadership is not something you reach one day. It is how you think every day. If there is one thing you remember from this journey, remember this. You do not need to wait for permission to begin. You do not need a title to think bigger. You only need to decide to take responsibility for direction. And that decision can be made today. If these principles resonate with what you are thinking, please like this video to help spread the message to more people. And subscribe to Jim Rohn Treasures to continue this journey of thinking, discipline, and growth with me in future videos. Before you leave, I want to ask you one question, and please answer honestly in the comments. Right now, are you busy? Or are you building something for your future? You and I both have a gift today. Use it wisely. I'll see you in the next video.